Alien girl found the humans still guarding her post. His reason for staying broke something soft. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The night pressed against the outpost like a living thing, the wind dragging sand across the metal deck with a dry whisper that never stopped. The auxiliary beacon flickered in a faint orange pulse, its broken rhythm tapping gently against Evan Cole's ribs every time it lit up his face. He stood alone at the small western post, boots planted, shoulders hunched inside a maintenance jacket not meant for night duty. The cold wasn't sharp, not yet, but it crept in the way loneliness did, quiet, steady, patient. He pulled his glove tighter with his teeth and checked the handheld scanner again, though nothing new blinked across the tiny cracked screen. He wasn't a soldier, never claimed to be one. He was a repair tech, good with wiring and stubborn bolts, someone who spent more time under panels than under starlight. And yet here he was, guarding a post that wasn't even his. He shifted his weight, listening to the faint hum of the station's perimeter field, a sound that faltered every few seconds like it was losing confidence. The tech crew had promised to fix it in the morning. Until then, someone had to stay out here just in case. He hadn't meant to volunteer. It just felt wrong to leave the post empty after she'd been called away. Lyra Thalen. Her name carried a smooth metallic rhythm he couldn't mimic no matter how many times she corrected him. She had stepped off her post 3 hours ago when command requested her presence inside the comms dome. She'd looked back once, almost apologetically, as if she didn't trust anyone else to cover for her. Evan remembered lifting a hand, telling her not to worry, that he'd keep an eye on things for a bit. A bit had turned into hours. The wind tugged at his jacket. Again, and he tucked his chin down, breath fogging in the beam of the flickering light. Every few minutes, he checked the perimeter readings. Quiet, quiet, quiet. A simple routine. A simple promise. The kind anyone could make, but not everyone kept. Time blurred, the outpost settling into a deep, hushed stillness. Then footsteps scraped softly across the deck behind him. Lyra's voice cut through the dark, low and steady, carrying something like disbelief. "Human, you're still here." Evan turned, blinking against the sudden wash of blue-green light from the comms dome behind her. Lyra stood framed in it, her turquoise skin catching the glow, her eyes reflecting a softened gold he hadn't seen on her before. She stepped closer, studying him the way someone studies an unexpected constellation. "My shift ended hours ago," she said quietly. "Why guard a post that isn't yours?" He shrugged, rubbing a thumb across the side of the scanner, suddenly aware of how tired his hands looked. Didn't feel right leaving it alone. The wind slowed for a moment, as if listening. Lyra's expression changed, subtle, but unmistakable. Something eased. Something warmed. And in that small silence, the world around them felt less empty. For a moment neither of them moved. The hum of the perimeter field stretching thin between them like a quiet thread. Evan shifted his grip on the handheld scanner, unsure if he should apologize or joke, or simply stand there until the wind made the decision for him. Lyra stepped closer instead, her boots whispering against the metal deck, the faint glow from the comms dome painting soft highlights along her turquoise skin. She stopped an arm's length away, studying him with a focus that made Evan feel as if she was reading every small choice he had made tonight. "Humans do not usually volunteer for extra duty," she said, her voice even but gentler than before. "Especially not for someone from another world." Evan exhaled slowly, watching his breath drift away in the cool desert air. "Guess I did not think about it like that. You were assigned here. You had work to do. Felt wrong to leave your station unguarded." Lyra tilted her head slightly. A gesture he had learned meant she was comparing what she heard to what she understood of humans, testing it for truth. The quiet stretched again, softer this time. She glanced at his jacket, too. Light for the night. At the thin layer of dust on his gloves, at the fatigue in his shoulders that betrayed how long he had been standing here. "You stayed for hours," she murmured. "What did you expect to happen out here?" Evan looked out toward the dark horizon, the sand dunes barely visible beneath the faint glow of the perimeter lights. Not much, he said honestly. But sometimes the point is not what happens. Sometimes the point is just keeping a promise. Lyra's gaze lowered for a moment, as if she were weighing the words with both logic and something quieter. When she looked up again, her expression had softened in a way he had never seen. In my culture, she said, a post is more than a location. It is a reflection of a person's honor. We guard them because they anchor who we are. If one abandons their post, they abandon a part of themselves. Evan rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed by how meaningful this sounded compared to what he thought was a simple favor. Well, he said, I am just a tech. But you seem to care about this place. So I did too. The wind shifted, warmer now, carrying fine dust that swirled around their boots without sting. Lyra looked past him toward the small structure built into the station wall, the one with a narrow door and a flickering interior light. There is a heater inside, she said quietly, and a bench. You do not need to stand out here any longer. Evan nodded, but he did not move. You first, he offered. She blinked at him, surprised by the simple courtesy. Then she stepped through the doorway, and Evan followed, closing the door behind them. The heater buzzed softly, filling the narrow room with a slow rising warmth. Lyra sat on the bench, her posture composed but no longer rigid. Evan leaned against the opposite wall, letting his hands thaw inside his gloves. For the first time tonight, silence felt comfortable. Lyra looked up at him, her voice softer than the heater's hum. Evan, she said, most would have left. I need you to understand that. He shrugged, cheeks warming in a way that had nothing to do with the heater. Maybe I am not most people. Lyra held his gaze for a long moment, something thoughtful and unexpected settling behind her eyes. And in the small, warm light of the room, the night outside no longer felt quite so dark. The heater's quiet buzz filled the small room with a steady warmth, softening the cold that had clung to Evan's jacket for hours. Lyra sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture composed yet edged with something unsettled, as if she were adjusting to a temperature she was not used to. The faint light cast gentle reflections along the subtle bioluminescent lines on her skin, making her look almost like she carried the night sky beneath the surface. Evan rubbed his palms together, feeling the circulation return in slow pulses. Sorry if I messed up your routine, he said, voice low but sincere. Lyra looked up at him, her expression shifting in a way he could not immediately read. You did not interfere, she replied. You filled a space that needed filling. That is uncommon. She paused, almost searching for the word. Unexpected. Evan chuckled under his breath. Most of my life has been unexpected. I guess I am used to stepping into gaps. Her gaze held steady. You stepped into mine without being asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to respond. There was no accusation in her voice, only a quiet honesty. He leaned back against the wall, the metal cool through his jacket. Outside, the wind shifted again, brushing across the door with a muted hiss. When you left earlier, he said, you looked like you were not sure anyone else would take over. I guess I wanted you to know someone would. Lyra's fingers tightened slightly, a small movement, but enough to show she heard the intention beneath the words. Where I am from, she said slowly. Responsibility is never shared. Each task belongs to one person alone. To fail it means to fail oneself. To trust another with it, she hesitated, and the silence that followed felt fragile. Is difficult. Evan nodded, understanding more than she expected him to. I know what it feels like to carry too much alone, he said quietly. Maybe that is why I stayed. Not for the post. For you. Lyra's breath caught in the smallest intake, almost imperceptible. She looked away toward the narrow window slit, where the night pressed its weight against the glass. Humans express meaning plainly, she murmured. People speak around the truth. We build walls with our words. Evan smiled. I am not great with walls. Never figured out how to build them right. I noticed, she said, and there was something warm tucked behind the observation. She studied him again, more openly this time. You are tired. You should rest. I will, he said, but only after I walk you back to your quarters. Lyra blinked, surprised by the offer and, perhaps, by the ease in which he made it. You do not need to escort me. Maybe not, he said gently, but sometimes the right thing is not about what we need. It is about what feels right. For a moment, Lyra did not speak. The heater hummed, a soft heartbeat in the quiet. When she finally rose, The faint glow along her skin shifted with the movement, like a soft ripple of starlight. "Very well, Evan Cole," she said, her voice lower, steadier. "Walk with me." And as the door slid open to the cool desert air, the night felt different, less empty, less wide, carrying the sense that something small but significant had shifted between them. The night air met them with a gentle push, warmer than before, as if the wind itself had softened while they spoke. The outpost lay quiet around them, a scatter of low buildings and antenna towers traced in thin lines of pale light. Evan walked a half-step behind Lyra, letting her set the pace, his boots tapping lightly against the metal walkway. Her stride was steady, but there was a looseness in her posture now, as if some invisible weight had eased from her shoulders. The bioluminescent lines across her skin glimmered faintly with each movement, catching the dim perimeter lights in soft reflections. They reached the wide corridor leading toward the living quarters, its ceiling arching in a shallow curve. A low hum from the energy conduits pulsed above them, steady and comforting, like a quiet mechanical heartbeat. "It feels different tonight," Evan said, hands in his pockets, eyes tracking the glow along the corridor walls. Lyra glanced at him, the gold in her eyes shifting subtly. "Different how?" Evan shrugged. "Less cold, less empty." Lyra looked forward again, but a small upward curve touched the corner of her mouth. "Perhaps you are tired," she said. "Or perhaps your perception is adjusting." "Maybe," Evan replied, but he could tell she did not believe her own explanation. She slowed near a junction where the corridor widened into an observation alcove. Beyond the window plate stretched the open desert, its dunes outlined by moonlight, the sky scattered with stars that looked close enough to touch. Lyra paused there, her gaze drawn outward. "My home world has 3 moons," she said quietly. "The night was never this dark." Evan leaned against the window frame, careful to give her space. "Do you miss it?" She hesitated before answering. "I miss knowing where everything belonged. Here, I am learning too many things at once." She turned toward him, her expression steady but open. "And humans, Evan Cole, are more complex than any report prepared me for." He huffed a soft laugh. "Most people would say we are simple." "No," she replied, shaking her head slowly. "You are unpredictable. You act from places you do not explain. It is difficult to categorize." "Is that a problem?" he asked gently. Lyra studied him for a long moment. "No," she said, "but it is unfamiliar." A soft alert tone chimed from the corridor panel, a reminder that her sector's rest cycle had officially begun. Lyra sighed, the sound almost too quiet to hear. "I should retire for the night." Evan nodded. "I will walk you the rest of the way." She opened her mouth to object, then closed it again, understanding it was not a matter of obligation but intent. They resumed their pace, the hallway growing quieter with each step. When they reached her door, Lyra stopped and turned fully toward him. The doorway's soft overhead light framed her in a muted halo, highlighting the delicate pattern along her temples. "Evan," she said, voice low but clear, "thank you for earlier. Not just for guarding the post. For staying. For listening." He rubbed the back of his neck again, that familiar gesture surfacing without thought. "Anytime," he said. "Really?" Lyra held his gaze, and for a moment the quiet felt like a shared breath. Then she placed her hand briefly over her heart, a gesture he recognized as a formal sign of respect among her people, though something about the softness in her eyes made it feel less formal than she intended. "Good night, Evan Cole." "Good night, Lyra." The door slid closed with a gentle hiss, leaving him standing in the muted glow of the hallway. And as he walked back toward his own quarters, he felt the night settle around him in a way that no longer felt lonely at all. The next morning arrived quietly, slipping into the outpost without ceremony. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a thin amber line along the desert horizon, a warmth that had not yet reached the metal walkways. Evan stepped outside with a mug of rehydrated coffee, the steam curling upward in delicate spirals that disappeared as soon as the breeze touched them. The station felt half awake, its systems humming at a lower tone as personnel moved through their early routines. He leaned against the railing outside the maintenance wing, letting the cup warm his hands while the cool morning air brushed against his face. He replayed the events of the previous night without meaning to, small details looping in and out of memory. Lyra's quiet footsteps beside him, The way her voice had dropped when she said his name. The look in her eyes at her door. Something steady and unfamiliar. He told himself not to overthink it. And then immediately overthought it anyway. The sound of soft footsteps approached from behind, lighter than any human stride. Evan turned just as Lyra appeared around the corner, her posture calm, but not as composed as she usually carried herself. The early sunlight cast a subdued shimmer along the faint bioluminescent lines at her temples. "Good morning, Evan Cole," she said, and there was something almost gentle in the way she shaped the words. "Morning," he replied, lifting his cup slightly. "Did you get any rest?" "More than expected," she said. Her gaze drifted toward the far side of the outpost, as if measuring the day ahead. "Your presence last night made the return to routine less difficult." Evan blinked. "Well, I am glad." She stepped to the railing beside him, maintaining a respectful distance, but close enough that he could feel the subtle difference in air temperature around her. For a moment, they simply watched the desert together, the dunes shifting imperceptibly in the wind. "There is something I wish to understand," Lyra said finally. "Why do humans keep promises even when the effort gains them nothing?" Evan took a slow sip of coffee, buying himself a moment to think. "I guess, because it says something about who we are," he said, showing up when it would be easier not to. Lyra considered this, her eyes tracing patterns in the sand below. "On my world, promises are recorded formally. They are binding. They carry consequence. Here," Evan said, "they carry meaning." She looked at him then, a long quiet look that felt as if she were seeing layers she had not noticed before. "Meaning," she repeated softly, testing the word. A soft chime echoed from the central tower, signaling the start of the morning rotation. Lyra straightened slightly, the shift in her posture returning some of her formal presence. "I must report to command," she said. "There is a briefing regarding perimeter readings." Evan nodded. "I will be assigned to maintenance checks after that. If you need anything, you know where to find me." She hesitated, her gaze lingering longer than necessary, the bioluminescent lines along her cheek brightening by a subtle degree. "Evan," she said, her voice quiet but sure. "Walking with you last night, it changed something in the way I see this place." He swallowed, the morning suddenly warmer than it had been a moment ago. "It changed something for me too." The wind rose gently between them, carrying the faint scent of heated sand. Lyra gave a small nod, almost a bow, then turned toward the command wing. Evan watched her go, wondering why each step she took felt like it pulled him a little farther into the gravity of something he did not yet have a name for. By midday the outpost had settled into its usual rhythm, a mix of quiet machinery and distant footsteps echoing through the metal corridors. Evan crouched beside an open-access panel near the perimeter gate, tightening a loose conduit that had been flickering all morning. The sun pressed down in steady waves, warming the metal beneath his hands. He wiped his brow with the back of his glove, listening to the soft hum of the recalibrated system. It was a simple fix, but simple fixes often kept stations like this alive. A faint reflection caught his eye on the panel surface. He looked up to see Lyra approaching from the command wing, her steps measured but her expression carrying attention he had not seen earlier. The bioluminescent lines along her temples were dimmer now, shifting in subdued pulses that hinted at unease. "You finished the briefing already?" Evan asked, pushing himself to his feet. Lyra folded her hands lightly behind her back. "The briefing was brief," she said, though her tone suggested there had been more to it. She glanced toward the gate, then back at him. "There was discussion regarding last night's perimeter readings. Some believe a temporary malfunction occurred." "And you?" Evan asked. "I believe the malfunction had a cause," she said quietly. "One that remains unclear." Something in her voice made Evan straighten. "Is everything all right?" Lyra hesitated, her gaze drifting across the sand outside the gate. "My people say that discomfort is the first sign of truth," she murmured. "This morning, during the briefing, I questioned a superior officer. I did not intend to." The words simply arrived. Evan blinked. "What did you ask?" "Why they dismissed the unusual readings," she said. "And why it did not matter that you remained outside far longer than any protocol requires." Her eyes flicked to him, steady and searching. They waved it aside. They always wave aside what they do not understand. Evan rubbed his palms together, not sure what to make of the sudden shift in her tone. Maybe they just have a lot going on. Lyra shook her head slowly. "You do not understand. On my world, questioning a superior is seen as a failure of restraint. It is rare, unexpected. It unsettled them. It unsettled me. Evan paused, letting that settle in the space between them. What made you do it? He asked gently. She met his gaze, unflinching. Because it mattered, she said. Because you were out there alone. Because something was unusual, and ignoring it felt. She searched for the right word. Wrong. A soft breeze swept across the walkway, stirring dust around their feet. Evan felt the weight behind her admission, not dramatic or loud, but something quieter and more profound. You did the right thing, he said. Asking questions is not weakness. Lyra's gold-flecked eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in careful thought. Humans speak of right and wrong as if they are simple, she said. For my people, these concepts are shaped by hierarchy, tradition, and function. But lately, she looked down at her hands, her voice dropping to a murmur. Lately, I am beginning to see them differently. Evan stepped closer, not invading her space, but offering something steady to anchor to. Different does not mean wrong, he said. Sometimes different just means honest. The wind shifted again, warm and gentle, brushing the edges of her hair. Lyra lifted her gaze to him, and in the brightness of the afternoon sun, something in her expression softened. Evan Cole, she said quietly, it is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain distance the way my training expects. Evan's breath caught, both surprised and not surprised at all. She looked away quickly, as if the admission had escaped without permission. Forget I said that, she added. I cannot, he said, his voice steady. She was still for a long moment, then exhaled slowly, the tension easing from her shoulders as if a truth unspoken had finally found its shape. And in the quiet hum of the perimeter field, neither of them stepped back. The afternoon stretched toward evening, pulling long shadows across the outpost as the sun dipped behind the dunes. The heat softened, traded for a cooler breeze that carried the scent of iron-rich sand. Evan finished recalibrating the last sensor node and brushed dust from his gloves, feeling the quiet settle around him in a way that was almost expectant. Lyra stood a few paces away, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the perimeter field shimmered in a faint arc. The bioluminescent lines along her skin glowed a little brighter now that daylight was fading, tracing delicate constellations across her temples and down her neck. Evan walked over, stopping beside her without speaking. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It felt like something earned. Lyra inhaled deeply, her shoulders lifting with the slow breath. Evan Cole, she said softly. I have been taught all my life that feeling too much is dangerous, that it clouds judgment. Feelings do not have to be a threat, Evan replied gently. They can tell us things we ignore when we try to act perfect. She turned her head slightly, studying him with an expression caught somewhere between curiosity and uncertainty. Humans speak as if emotion is a compass, she murmured. For my people it is considered a storm. Evan gave a small smile. Storms can clear the air. Lyra looked down at her hands. When I questioned my superior earlier, it was not logic that drove me. It was, she paused, searching for a word that did not seem to exist in her language. Concern. For you. The wind shifted again, brushing gently across the metal walkway. Evan felt the weight of her admission settle into the quiet space between them, not heavy, but meaningful. I am here, he said softly. Whatever happened this morning, you do not have to carry it alone. She met his gaze then, and for the first time there was no barrier in her eyes, no attempt to hide the warmth rising beneath her calm exterior. That is the part one do not understand, she whispered. You keep offering steadiness even when there is nothing for you to gain. Maybe I do, Evan said, because I want to, because you matter. The word hung in the air, fragile but true. Lyra exhaled slowly, the faint glow along her temples brightening with emotion. My training tells me I should step back, she said. Create distance. And what do you want? Evan asked. Lyra hesitated, her gold-flecked eyes holding his with quiet intensity. I want, she said slowly, to stay exactly where I am. Before Evan could respond, a soft chime sounded from her wrist console, a gentle reminder that the evening check-in was approaching. But she did not move. The desert wind swept around them again, carrying warmth instead of cold. Lyra took one step closer, just enough that their shoulders nearly touched. This is unfamiliar, she murmured. but it does not feel wrong. Evan's voice was barely above a breath. It is not wrong. For a long, peaceful moment, they stood together at the edge of the outpost, the fading light painting gentle colors across the sky. And as the perimeter field shimmered softly in front of them, the distance she had been trained to keep simply disappeared. Night settled over the outpost in a slow descent, the last traces of daylight fading into a deep indigo that wrapped itself around the metal structures like a quiet veil. Evan and Lyra walked back toward the central wing, their steps steady, unhurried, as if neither wished to break whatever fragile balance had formed between them. The walkway lights shimmered beneath their feet, small warm glows guiding them forward. Lyra kept her gaze ahead, but her posture had changed in ways Evan could feel more than see. The rigid alignment of her shoulders had softened. Her steps matched his without thought. The quiet between them carried the warmth of something understood but not yet spoken. Aloud, as they approached the inner sector door, Lyra paused. The door remained closed, but she did not reach for the panel. "Evan Cole," she said, her voice low, "there is something you do not know." Evan turned toward her, the evening breeze brushing lightly against his jacket. "What is it?" Lyra looked down at her hands, then slowly lifted her gaze to meet his. "Earlier, when I questioned my superior, it was not only my words that surprised them. It was my emotional resonance." He blinked. "You're what?" "In my species," she explained, "strong emotion causes a measurable shift in bioluminescent patterns. They believed it indicated a malfunction." She gave a faint, almost wry exhale. "They ran tests." Evan's brow furrowed. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said softly. But the readings revealed something that unsettled them. She stepped slightly closer, the subtle glow along her temples brightening, as if responding to her own admission. "They detected that my emotional activity was centered around one source." Evan felt his breath still. "Around what?" Lyra held his gaze, unblinking. "You." The words settled between them like a quiet spark, small but undeniable. Evan opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Lyra, I did not mean to cause trouble for you." "You did not cause trouble," she said, shaking her head gently. "You caused a shift, a change I did not anticipate." She turned slightly, looking toward the desert beyond the outpost walls. "My people view attachment as a deviation. They believe clarity comes from distance." She looked back to him, her voice steady even as the glow along her skin brightened in soft pulses. "But distance is no longer possible." Evan felt something warm unfold in his chest, steady and grounding. He took a careful step closer, not touching her, but letting the space narrow until the heat of their nearness hummed gently between them. "Lyra," he said quietly, "whatever they think, whatever those readings said, none of that defines you." She searched his face, as if trying to confirm something she had only guessed at before. "Then what does define me?" Evan's voice softened. "Your choices." Lyra's breath caught, just slightly, the glow across her temples shifting in a ripple of pale turquoise. "And what if my choice," she said, barely above a whisper, "is to remain where you are?" Evan felt the weight of the moment settle fully, neither heavy nor frightening, but something steady and real. "Then," he said gently, "you are choosing something honest." Lyra lowered her gaze for a moment, as if absorbing his words into a place she had never opened before. When she lifted her eyes again, they were bright with something unmistakably warm. "Evan Cole," she murmured, "your presence disrupts every rule I have known." He smiled softly. "Maybe that is all right." For the first time since he met her, she allowed a quiet smile to touch her lips, subtle but luminous. And under the soft glow of the walkway lights, she whispered, "Perhaps disruption is what I needed." The door behind her slid open with a gentle hum, but neither of them stepped through. For a long, breath-held moment, they remained where the corridor light met the night air, two silhouettes standing close, held by something neither of them had planned yet both could feel. The door behind Lyra remained open, a soft rectangle of light framing her silhouette, but she did not step through it. The night held both of them in place, as if the desert itself had paused to listen. Evan stood close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin, a warmth that matched the quiet glow tracing the lines along her temples. She exhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone released only when they had stopped trying to hide the truth. "Evan Cole," she said, her voice steady but touched with something fragile. There is one more thing I have not told you. Evan waited, sensing the weight of the moment. Lyra lifted her wrist console, the dim display casting a pale light across her fingers. After the test today, my superiors reviewed my behavior over the last rotation. They concluded that I have formed an emotional tether. She lowered the console, her gaze meeting his with calm clarity. Tethers are rare among my people. They are not forbidden, but they are significant. Evan swallowed quietly. Significant in what way? A tether means my focus has shifted, she explained. It means someone has become part of my decision-making, part of my sense of place. Her voice softened. Part of my purpose. The walkway lights flickered gently, as if emphasizing her words. Evan felt a warmth rise through his chest, steady and grounding. And this tether, he said, it is connected to me? Yes, she replied without hesitation. I did not intend for it. It formed the moment I found you still guarding my post. She stepped closer, close enough that the glow from her skin merged with the soft amber of the walkway lights. You stayed for no reward, no recognition, no obligation. You stayed because it was right. Her voice dropped to a quiet murmur. On my world, such an act is almost unknown. Evan felt his breath catch, not from surprise, but from the quiet conviction in her voice. Lyra, he said gently, I stayed because I saw how much that post mattered to you. And because you matter to me. The faintest tremor crossed her expression, like a ripple of light beneath calm water. She looked down, gathering herself, then lifted her gaze once more. There is a custom among my people, she said. A gesture made only when a tether is accepted rather than denied. She raised her hand slowly, palm facing him, the bioluminescence shimmering in soft turquoise waves. If I offer this, she continued, and you place your hand against mine, it means you acknowledge the tether. It means you choose to stand with me. Evan's heart beat a little harder, but the choice was not difficult. It felt as if he had been moving toward this moment from the instant he found himself standing guard in the cold night air. He lifted his hand and placed it gently against hers. The glow beneath her skin brightened in a quiet bloom of color, not dramatic, but warm and full, like a sunrise just beginning. Lyra inhaled softly, her eyes reflecting both surprise and relief. Evan Cole, she whispered, you have altered the way I see my place in this world. And you, he said, have changed mine. For a long moment they stood hand to hand, the light between their palms pulsing in a slow, calm rhythm. No declarations, no grand promises. Just a shared truth settling quietly into the space between them. When they finally lowered their hands, the night around them felt different, gentler, as if the outpost itself recognized the shift. Lyra stepped back toward her doorway, her expression no longer guarded. Good night, Evan Cole, she said softly. Evan nodded, feeling something steady and warm anchor itself inside him. Good night, Lyra. The door slid closed, leaving him standing alone in the quiet corridor. But for the first time on that distant outpost, he did not feel alone at all.